Hi, and welcome to this live reading from The Heart Knows, a rock and romance story by R.L. Merrill. And this is presented by Itsy Bitsy Book Bits. Chapter 1, Wrong, March. Today feels wrong. My principal, Jerry Scott, and I were standing out in front of the school greeting kids as they walked in. She turned to acknowledge my statement, and I could tell by her grim countenance that she felt it too. It was a March morning, chilly and unusually clear. It just felt off. When working at an alternative high school, an off-putting feeling can be really bad news. I'd been doing this work long enough that I knew instinctively that vibes like this were to be taken seriously. My name is Leah Mariana Trujillo Roberts, and I love being a teacher. Love it. For real. Teaching is my life, my calling, my soul's desire, and for the past 7 years, I've gone to work every day anticipating a new adventure. I especially love the scariest kids with the most aggravating attitudes. The bigger the challenge the kid is perceived to be, the more I embrace them. Mi mama instilled in me from the time I was her pequeña peleadora, her little fighter, that we are put on this earth to make it a better place. And I've wanted to do all I can to help my students help themselves grow and be something they only dreamed they could achieve. I teach English from mi corazón and try to show all of my students how important it is to expand their horizons, to see that there is so much more waiting for them outside of our town, especially in the barrio del norte. Drugs, violence, teen pregnancy, and gangs are la vida over here. I want more for my kids. On this particular morning, I surveyed the hills behind the school, and even the deer we watched graze each morning were noticeably absent. I didn't like it. There was no breeze, and the air was suffocatingly still. Mama used to call this earthquake weather, which was fitting, although I wasn't worried about a natural disaster at this point. It's March, Leah. If anything's going to go wrong, this is the time for it. The kids are antsy, the weather is fickle, and it's still 2 more weeks until spring break. We're sitting ducks here. I didn't like that Jerry felt the same way I did. She and I stood outside the gates saying good morning to the students every day. It was a ritual that benefited us all equally. We felt welcomed and cared for, and we got to see which kids maybe needed a little more support or reassurance, and we were able to further build relationships with our sometimes broken children. The kids dragged themselves up the line, muttered hellos, and gripped their Starbucks cups like lifelines. I got a few hugs from my favorite students, so did Jerry. I found myself praying that none of my babies would be harmed. We made it into class with no issues, gracias a Dios. However, most of the students were barely awake. The first 2 periods went by without a hitch. By third period, they were lively and ready to make me work for my money. Okay, folks, I'm going to pass out copies of our next book we'll be reading. It's a collection of short stories that I think you guys will be able to relate to, yes? The kids picked up their paperbacks and collectively frowned at the title. Ms. Roberts, do we really have to read this stupid book? Angel asked. Several students joined in with his complaints, which was usually the case. I almost tripped over one student who was spilling out of the confines of his sleigh desk. Angel, or Angel's legs were sprawled out in the center aisle of a tiny room. At 6 foot 4 inches and well over 250 pounds, Angel Dominguez was notorious for being involved in gang activities. But in my classroom, he was like a huge stuffed teddy bear. He was always respectful to me, but he often pushed the boundaries of that respect by acting like a petulant child. On hell, I promise. This book is not stupid. I think you'll see some parallels between life in Union City and life on the Spokane Reservation. Just because people don't live in your barrio doesn't mean that they don't experience similar hardships. In fact, for some of you, this collection of short stories will hit a little close to home, and I hope we can talk about that. I loved teaching The Lone Ranger and the Tonto Fist Fight in Heaven by Sherman Alexie. They were such great stories, and the kids often felt afterwards as though maybe they weren't so alone in this world, and that others had gone through similar trials and tribulations. The bell rang for break, and my oversized babies poured out of my classroom and onto the broad, sunny walkway between buildings. Our campus was rectangular shaped, with classrooms on the outsides and in the middle. The buildings were situated to utilize the sun's natural lighting, and solar panels topped each roof. The sun always shined brightly on the stark pavement. It was aesthetically beautiful, but sunglasses came in handy for sure. I was also glad for my school hoodie this morning, as it was still chilly even though the sun was out. I was looking forward to warmer days when I could pull out my capris and sandals, but for now, jeans and Nikes would have to suffice. I took up a watch spot at the end of the walkway outside the science classroom and listened with a smile as two of my favorite girls came walking up. You should have seen them grow up. They were hella stupid, all slapping each other and pulling hair just like little girls. I laughed hella hard. Maria and Elena were fight junkies. They hung out at the local movie theater on the weekends to watch other kids fight. A large number of fight videos on YouTube were probably filmed by them. Don't you girls have anything more productive to do on weekends than watch fights? Aren't there any girls or guys around who are worth your time? We have this conversation at least once a week, and it always went the same. Miss Roberts, they're all drama queens or broke-ass little boys who just want to play with their homies or mooch off girls dumb enough to put up with them. Hard for my money, I ain't about to waste it on no pendejo. I loved Maria's outlook. She reminded me of myself at 17, too busy trying to make something of myself to deal with drama. It still rang true for the most part, although I did allow myself to play occasionally. I asked the girls how they liked their jobs. A recruiter for a local juice bar came to our job fair and hired them on the spot with the glowing recommendations I'd written for them. These girls had both come to our program last year behind in credits and with huge chips on their shoulders. Now they were taking care of business with their credits and both were on the honor roll, an accomplishment neither of them had ever dreamed of achieving previously. They still had attitudes, for sure, but they used them to their advantage now and not for self-destructive purposes. Great, Ms. Roberts, Elena said with a proud smile. I'm going to train to be an assistant manager this summer. I gave her a hug and congratulated her. It may not seem like the most exciting job now, but eventually your experience will help you get a job you really love. They thanked me and waved as the bell rang, signaling the end of break. I was just taking a deep breath when I heard shouts from inside the science classroom. I dashed in, followed closely by our campus monitor, and found two large boys entwined in a hateful, rage-filled embrace. Micah Wallace was bleeding from his mouth and throwing punches into Sam Tran's midsection. Sam grabbed Micah's locks, tried to pull him away, and then socked him in the face again. Micah was growling, angry tears poured down his face, and Sam spoke through a clenched jaw. Back the fuck off me, man. Back off, I'm gonna fucking hurt you. Our campus monitor, one of my good friends, got a hold of Sam and was able to get him to disentangle from Micah's hair. I got in front of Micah and talked to him in a low voice with his hands on his waist. He towered over me and at this point was still straining to get that Sam, but I felt him start to relax infinitesimally under my hands. Okay, sweetie, come on. We made it to the counselor's office so we can get you cleaned up. You need to let this go now. A few more deep breaths and he looked down at me with pain in his eyes. He nodded and let me guide him out of the room with an arm around his waist. I let Sam out the back door and down the opposite hallway to the front office to avoid further contact. I walked Micah to the counselor's office and asked the counselor, Abra Mora, if I could have a moment with her. She told me she'd cover my class for me until I could get back, so I thanked her. I'd known Micah since he was a sixth grader. I was a student teacher at the middle school and he hit it off really well. Micah's father wasn't in the picture, and his mother suffered from respiratory illness. Micah spent many mornings wondering if his mother was actually going to wake up. He'd shed tears in the classroom after school. In the mornings, he would come see me for a granola bar to get him through his classes until he could get his free lunch. Micah, what on earth got you so upset that you risked your spot here? Our school had a strict no violence policy. Micah was looking at expulsion if we couldn't figure out a way to fix this situation. Ms. Roberts, I'm so sorry, he said, wincing as he felt the damage done to his lip. I went into Abra's fridge and got an ice pack for him. No, I shouldn't have let him get to me, but he was talking hella shit about Jasmine. Jasmine Valencia, the reigning queen on campus, had been Micah's main squeeze until last week when she'd shown up at school with me with Sam. The two boys had been close friends until Sam broke the bro code by snatching up Micah's girl. Fortunately, Micah had fallen desperately in love with Jasmine, and he took her betrayal really hard. He was such a sensitive kid, which made him prone to overreactions. I know it's hard. I know you really cared about her, Micah, but you can't let this ruin your life. You just can't. Work too hard to let that little girl screw up your future. I'd gotten Micah an internship with a local tattoo artist. At 18, he was already a celebrated artist for our community. I had his drawings up in my classroom, and he was even designing a mural for the side of the gym. No, Miss Roberts, I just can't believe she left me for him, my brother, you know? He and I've been through it. He was there for me when my mom was in the hospital. I fucking lived at his house. He's got everything to take her. He was crying again, so I stood next to him and let him lean his head against my side. I brushed back his hair, fingering reforms of his locks came out in my hand. Sam had really hurt him, but I know Micah would have kept fighting as angry as he was if we hadn't stepped in. Jerry came in then, and her look of disappointment told me Micah was really in trouble. I knew her hands were tied. Mr. Wallace, want to tell me what happened? Micah hung his head between his hands. Mrs. Scott, I apologize. I know better than to let him egg me on. I just lost it. It won't happen again. The pleading in his voice broke something in me. I felt sick thinking of what might happen to him. I appreciate your apology, but you violated policy, and I have no choice but to put you up before the board. I'm going to recommend suspended expulsion, however, because you've never broken even a single rule. If I get it approved, you'll be put on independent study with Mrs. Lasser. And not in his spirit body. You understand? I'm really sorry. I understand if I can't come back. I squeezed his shoulder. Have faith, Mike. Mrs. Scott will work it out so you can stay with us. I'll help you with your work however I can, okay? He tried to smile, but his mouth was a maze. I frowned when I noticed he was still bleeding. Mrs. Scott, I think he needs medical attention. The bleeding hasn't stopped. Is there someone who can take you to the hospital? My brother could come get me. She left us to make arrangements. Micah dialed his older brother, Sheldon, and I overheard shouting coming from the other end of the line. I walked Micah outside 15 minutes later when we heard his brother pull into the parking lot in this obnoxiously loud muscle car. You going to be okay, Micah? He gave me a hug and sighed. Thanks, Ms. Roberts. He started to pull away, turning towards his brother's car. The next few seconds changed my life forever.